Hello everyone, welcome to a new video of your Polyglot Academy. Today it's lesson 33 and we're going to talk about the comparative and the superlative, so let's start. Now, firstly, what is the comparative? Well, the comparative is simply a syntactic construction that serves to express a comparison between two entities or group of entities in quality or degree. So this simply means that if we have two boys, for example, and the boy on the left side is taller than the one on the right side, then we're kind of building a comparative. We are comparing the two qualities of these two boys, in this case, their height, and we're simply expressing that the left one is taller than the right one. And by saying is taller than, we're practically making the comparative, we're building it. So how do you form the comparative in German? Well, in German it is pretty easy, since you simply have to add er to the adjective. So for example, let's take an example. If you have the adjective schön, then the comparative is going to be schöner. And that is also the same in English. Tall is the normal adjective, and to build the comparative, we're going to say taller. So this is very important to know, and it's also very easy to remember because it's basically the same thing. Here is an example. Ich bin kleiner als du, and this means I'm shorter than you. Now, in this case, it is very important to remember the construction and the usage of such a comparative. Firstly, we are building a normal sentence, ich bin. Then you're saying kleiner instead of klein, because you're building the comparative of short, which is going to be shorter. And because we're making a comparison between my height and your height, we're going to say als du, which means than you. So the construction of the comparative is basically the same as in English. Ich bin kleiner als du. So we have basically the subject and the verb, then the comparative with als, and then the thing which is being compared. So this is pretty easy. Here's another example. Mein Auto ist schneller als das Auto von Paul, which means my car is faster than Paul's car. And in this case, you're comparing my car with Paul's car. And because my car is faster, I'm going to say schneller instead of schnell. And because we're comparing it, we have to write als, which means then. Now, right now, we're going to talk about the superlative. What is the superlative? Well, the superlative is simply the form of an adjective or adverb that shows the thing or action described has more of the quality than all others at the same time. So let's take an example. If we have 5 men, as in the picture, and if you would like to express then the man in the middle is the smallest out of everyone, then we're basically going to build a superlative. We would like to express that the man in the middle has more of the quality than all others at the same time. So in this case, we would like to express that he's the smallest out of them all. So how do you build it in German? Well, in German, it is pretty straightforward. You simply have to write the preposition am, which is being followed by the adjective, and then we're going to add sten at the end of the adjective. So let's have a look at an example. If you have, for example, klein, in order to build the superlative, you're first going to add am, and then the adjective is going to be followed by sten. So you're going to have am kleinsten. Another example, if you have schön, then it's going to be am schönsten. You're simply adding am before the adjective and then sten at the end of it. Now let's build some example sentences. Das Auto von meinem Bruder ist am schönsten, which means my brother's car is the most beautiful of them all. And by saying am schönsten, we are expressing that it is the most beautiful out of all the cars in a specific group or in a specific place. So it is very important to use the superlative, because while using it, it is going to show that your vocabulary is more advanced and that you can build more complex sentences. Now, even though we have some rules for the comparative and for the superlative, we also should consider some irregularities that we might have. Now, for example, let's have a look at the first 3 adjectives. Gut, which means good, viel, which means much, and gern, which means gladly. If you would try to build, for example, the comparative of gut, then you couldn't just add er to the end and say guter. That would be false, because the comparative of gut is irregular and is going to be besser. And superlative is going to be am besten. The same applies for viel. Viel becomes mehr, which becomes am meisten. And the same also applies to gern, which becomes lieber and which becomes am liebsten. So these three examples we just talked about are simply examples of proper irregular adjectives. So they're simply irregular, and we simply have to learn them in order to conjugate the comparative and the superlative corrective. Now, the second possibility we have is a change of the sequence of the letters. So, for example, if you compare the adjective dunkel with its comparative dunkler, then you can see that we are basically changing the sequence of the letters E and L so that we have dunkel and then dunkler for the comparative, and then dunkelsten for the superlative. And the same applies also to teuer. Now, the third possibility we had is for one syllable adjectives such as warm, jung, and klug. And these adjectives tend to add the umlaut to the comparative and the superlative. So the umlaut is basically these 2 points we have on top of the first vowel. So, for example, warm is going to become wärmer, jung is going to become jünger, klug, klüger, and that is also the same for the superlative. Now we still have two possibilities for adjectives ending in d, t, s, double s, scharfes s, sh, x, sie. Take the ending est in the superlative and not the standard ending. So, for example, if you have the adjective wild, which means wild, then the superlative is going to become am wildesten, which would mean wildest. So it is also an irregularity. And the last possibility we have is basically the first one, but it's just a way to remind you that there are more proper irregularities. We do not just have the first three verbs I've just mentioned right at the beginning. We also have verbs like na, which become näher, am nächsten, or for example, hoch, höher, am höchsten, etc. So there are lots of irregular verbs, but the rule I just explained mostly applies for almost every adjective. So just learn it and then you'll be okay. Now, before ending the video, we should also discuss the comparative of equality. Now, what we just talked about was not a simple comparative, but it was mainly a comparative of majority. We would kind of say that someone has more of a quality than someone else. Someone is taller than someone else. Someone is smarter than someone else. Sometimes, while making a comparison, we wouldn't necessarily like to say that someone is smaller or taller than someone else, but for example, that they are as small or as tall. So the question we have is, how do we say that in German? How do you say, for example, that I am as smart, tall, etc. as you? And in order to do that, we're going to use the construction so or genauso plus the adjective followed by wie. Here's a concrete example. If you would like to say I am as tall as you in German, then first you would build the subject and the verb, so ich bin, and then you would say genauso or so, it is basically the same, followed by the adjective, which is groß, followed by wie, and then you, which would mean two. So this is the construction. Ich bin so groß wie du would mean I am as tall as you. The last thing we would also like to talk about is the comparative of minority. So if you would like to express that someone or something is less smart or less capable than something else, then we're going to build the comparative of minority. And in order to do that in German, we're simply going to use this construction we have right here. So we're firstly going to say weniger, followed by the adjective, followed by als. Here's an example. In order to say I am less smart than you, you're simply going to say ich bin, and then you're going to apply the construction weniger schlau als, and then you're going to end your sentence with du, because you're making a comparison between my intelligence and yours. Now, if you understood everything, I would recommend you to do the exercises. We have 3 parts. Now, firstly, try to write the comparative of majority and the superlative of the 10 adjectives I wrote. Secondly, try to complete with the comparative of equality. So try to kind of transform these sentences in order to form the comparative of equality. And lastly, simply complete the 3 sentences with the comparative of the adjective in the parentheses. If you went so far, thanks for your attention. And if you have any questions, just leave a comment and I will get at you as soon as possible. Thanks for your attention again, and have a nice day. See you next time.